Welcome back to the channel. Today we are taking a look into film footage, live performances, and spoken word artists of Nikki Giovanni. Please go into the comments and tell me your thoughts about her as well as this video. And as always, don't forget to like, share, watch more videos, and subscribe to the channel.
She was born in Tennessee, raised in Ohio, and her career has transcended generations. Poet extraordinaire, spoken word artist, author, teacher, and activist. Her name, Nikki Giovanni, and the History Makers, the nation's largest African-American video oral history archive, is proud to present An Evening with Nikki Giovanni. And now to our host, novelist and playwright, Miss Pearl Cleage.
Nikki Giovanni's earliest memory of me is as a young child in need of a babysitter. I used to try to tell her that this couldn't be true because she's only my senior by a few years, but she insisted. And after a while, I realized that our actual ages are completely beside the point. It's the spirit of our first meeting that's important. What she remembers is that when she first encountered me at my father's church on the west side of Detroit, Michigan, I seemed to her so full of youthful innocence and naivete that I was in need of a good babysitter. What I remember about her is that she was a girl poet from Cincinnati, outspoken, unapologetically female in a sea of macho males, who pulled up for her reading in a beat-up little car with her books in the trunk, a perfect afro adorning her head, and a grin on her face that said this was the best possible way to live your life if you were a woman in love with the careful arrangement of words on paper. And she was right. Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, the words of Nikki Giovanni.
I was born in the Congo.
I walked to the Fertile Crescent and built the Sphinx.
I designed a pyramid so tough that a star that only glows every 100 years falls into the center, giving divine, perfect light.
I am bad.
I sat on the throne drinking nectar with Allah.
I got hot and sent an ice age to Europe to cool my thirst.
My oldest daughter is Nefertiti. The tears from my birth pains created the Nile.
I am a beautiful woman.
I gazed on the forest and burnt out the Sahara Desert with a pack of goat's meat and a change of clothes.
I crossed it in 2 hours.
I am a gazelle so swift you can't catch me.
For his birthday present when he was 3, I gave my son Hannibal an elephant. He gave me Rome for Mother's Day. My strength flows ever on.
My son Noah built Newark, and I stood proudly at the helm as we sailed on a soft summer day.
I turned myself into myself and was Jesus. Men intoned my loving name. All praises, I am the one who would save.
I sold diamonds into my backyard. My bowels deliver uranium. The fillings from my fingernails are semi-precious jewels.
On a trip north, I caught a cold and blew my nose, giving oil to the Arab world. I am so hip, even my errors are correct.
I sailed west to reach east and had to round off the earth as I went.
The head on my hair thinned, and gold was laid across 3 continents.
I am so perfect, so divine, so ethereal, so surreal, I cannot be comprehended.
Except by my permission.
I mean, I can fly like a bird in the sky, in the sky, in the sky, in the sky, in the sky,
Please welcome Nikki Giovanni. You did good. We have been so excited about doing this. We've known each other for such a long time, so we've kind of had a good time getting ready for this moment when we invite you all into the conversation.
I cried when I first saw that. But I want to say something before you go on. See, Pearl always says I didn't babysit her because I'm not that much older than she is. But what she forgets is that the difference between 20 and 12 is it changes when you're 20 and 28, right? And when you get to be 40 and 48, right, it gets erased. You are actually now older than I am because... right? because she's a grandmother and I'm not. And grandmother, right? So I did babysit her. I don't want you to think I was a coward, because I wasn't a coward. But Reverend Cleage would always look. He didn't want to. He didn't want Pearl and his sister home alone. And so he would say, "Who would keep my children?" Well,
Tell me about some people in your life that's younger than you but appear to be older than you.
well, quite naturally, I could go out into the street and get my head beat, right? Or I could babysit and be doing revolutionary duty. This was a no-brainer.
So this is the babysitter of my dreams. You've written hundreds of poems, and many of us have been moved by them for years. This one that our beautiful sister started us off with is one that continues to be one of your more popular ones. What audience did you have in mind when you wrote that poem, and why do you think people still respond to it so enthusiastically?
Well, I grew up with and we all did actually, with a poem called Shine. Mm-hmm. And Shine is about the fact that the Titanic went down, there were no black people, right? But it's a male. For those of you who know Shine, and I could not begin to respond, but it's a dirty poem, but it's, shine, shine, save poor me, and I'll, whatever. And Shine swam on, right? But the men always had a way to say who they were. And you get tired of the little girls always doing the little Johnny Walker sat in the saucer, and they're always, looking to the east and west for someone to love them. And I thought, crap. Little girls, little girls need one. And so I wanted to write one of those poems for little girls. And the rule in writing is start at the beginning. And so I'm driving down to Livingston campus, and I'm driving, and it's like, whoa, wait. I was born in the Congo. And once you get your first line, right? And it just, historic. I just made everybody, I just made everybody a black woman, right? So I got Christopher Columbus, because he's the one who sailed west to east, right? He's going to have to round. The black woman is everything. And I just wanted to do that so the little girls could do it. Well, I volunteer a lot in daycare centers and stuff. And maybe 5 years after I'd written the poem, people were listening to it, and I'm delighted. But again, you don't have a sense of it. But I was at a daycare center, and they said, we want to perform for you. And so I was like, that's cool, because it's the first time you hear somebody call you Miss Giovanni, you feel old. But they were little kids. And a little boy got up, and I was born in the Congo. And because I never thought of boys liking that poem. And so the surprise and the delight, I knew I had a good poem once it was finished, but to know that I had a poem that inclusive was wonderful. And I think that's what's made it live, that it is an inclusive, it did not exclude anybody, because I think everybody's a black woman anyway.
I want to talk a little bit about your family. You were born Yolanda Cornelia Giovanni Jr. in Knoxville, Tennessee, and you're named after your mother. Who named you Nikki?
My sister did, but that's a part of the myth that we will never know, because Gary's only 3 years. Her name is Gary. That was Gary Ann, but we dropped that when we moved north. But it's something in the South that you people got 2 names for everything. But that's true. But Gary started calling me Nikki. My Aunt Agnes says that it's because they had a friend who used to kiss babies and say, "Give me a little Nikki," and she would kiss him on the neck, right? And that Gary misheard and thought that that was me. But Gary was only 3, so we don't know. But it's a cool name, so I've kept it. It works, but that.
You didn't stay in Knoxville very long. Your family moved north, and you grew up in the Cincinnati area. Tell me a little bit about your parents, about how you all got to Ohio and what it was like growing up in Cincinnati.
We were actually a part of the Great Migration. But if you had asked me that 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said it like that. But my dad's family is from right outside of Mobile, Alabama. His mother's name was Maddie. And Maddie Jones moved the kids to Cincinnati. Gus had a job working with juveniles, in fact. And ultimately, my mother has a job teaching school.
What do you remember most about growing up in Cincinnati?
I grew up in Woodlawn, and we had an outhouse. And I've always loved outhouses. And I'm not a... That's true. That's true. I'm not a person who wishes she was rich. I mean, you got to put bread on the table, and you got to have a car. My car is 17 years old, so things like that don't bother me. But if I would ever be rich, even yet, what I would do is I would build a round house, because it makes sense. And I would put all of my windows on the inside, right? And I would have a courtyard. And the reason that I would do that is that rich people make you crazy, because you end up being jealous because they have these big homes, and so people come in, they kill you, right? Or they rob you. And then you have to hire people to kill them. I mean, it gets so ugly when all you have to do is build a house and put it on the inside, right? And I would do that.
I like that.
Oh, yeah,
I like
it's something, it just stops a lot of confusion. But I would build my kitchen, of course, away, because, you shouldn't have to smell your chitlins, you shouldn't have to smell your, what you're cooking, right? But I would also build an outhouse, because it only makes sense. And I would build, I'd have my bidet, I would have my bath, I'd have my sauna, I'd have, of course, my refrigerator, chilling my champagne and my Chardonnay, right? And I would have all that, and it's an outhouse. Architectural Digest would call me. No question. No question.
We're going to be looking for that house.
Yeah, no, you know what I'm saying? No, Oprah be on the phone, girl, what
need
you
that
got?
house.
I want that. I'd be selling, because Oprah's rich, I'd be selling her my plans for a lot of money. That's the truth. My memory of the outhouse is of the fact that my mother had flowers. It was a traditional outhouse, right? And she had magazines in there. And what I liked about it was that if you went to the outhouse, nobody knocked on the door. Our next house, that was in Woodlawn, we lived on Fichet Street. Our next home had a regular situation. And there was always somebody wanting to come into the toilet. So I was like, aren't you finished? Get out of there. And so I'm having memories that I know don't make sense in a way. And I know that other people could look at it and say, you couldn't have been happy. But I was.
It's often true, I think, that there is one person in a family who gets it, who understands that this child is a little different, but she's a writer. And it's my understanding that your grandmother was that person in your family for you. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about your grandmother?
Yeah.
And we got tissues, so you can cry all you want to. It's okay.
Yeah, I still remember grandmother's phone number is 31593. Yeah. I just don't know where we'd be without the grandmothers, period. Not just mine. One of the, you're not that much younger, but you look at civil rights just a smidgen different. But one of the things that definitely happened with people my age is that we had choices. We could tell our grandmothers we can't do it, or we could change the world. It was way easier to change the world. It was. I remember, and I never liked to picket. Some people got really high off of picketing. All of that stuff scared the crap out of me. But how was I going to tell grandmother I couldn't go and picket actually Richards when the first time I picketed?
And she volunteered you,
didn't
she
did.
For the demonstration?
They went to, but they went the day that the kids were bombed in Birmingham, right? And that was a Sunday. And grandmother was one of those, because she would do that, and it was very annoying. I loved it, but that was annoying. And she would say, stay home, get off the phone, do not stand in front of the window. And it's because, in a way, the Birmingham bombing was war. And all of the old women, that's when adults were adults. All of the old women and men went to churches all over Knoxville, because I'm in Knoxville, Tennessee, and they were trying to decide what to do, and they decided to picket. And, of course, they were, Reverend James, Mount Zion Baptist Church, was looking for volunteers, and grandmother was first to stand up, right? And when she came in the house, grandmother had one of those looks, you always know. And when she came home, I was sitting there waiting to see what was going to, and she said, Nikki. And I thought, I recognized the tone. She said, Nikki, we decided we're going to picket. And I said, yes, grandmother, because that was the answer then. She said, and they called for volunteers. And I said, yes, grandmother. She said, and I told them, John Brown and I, because that's my grandfather, John Brown and I were too old, but my granddaughter was here. And she's gonna be there. She said, now you go on to bed, because get up in the morning and I'll give you breakfast and you'll go on up, and Grandpapa, John Brown and I will take a cab and we'll come and watch you later. I said, yeah, later I'll be dead, grandmother. But she didn't, I did. Who wants to go picket? Nobody did, but how was I gonna tell her, well, actually you made a mistake. I did mention, I said, does mommy know you're trying to get me killed? But she gave me a hug and thought I was kidding.
Was that your first? Was that your first demonstration? Was that your first experience with absolutely confronting racism in a direct way?
No, that was my first picketing. Because I grew up at that age. People had begun picketing. We picketed even in Cincinnati against some of the things in the South. See, my sister integrated Wyoming High School, and what we remember about Wyoming High School and that is that Gary was there in Wyoming High School when Emmett Till was killed. And when Emmett Till was killed, everybody was upset, but there were only 3 black kids, Jimmy, Beverly, and Gary are the only 3 black kids, right? And so they wanted they were in sociology class, and they wanted them to say something about it. The sociology teacher said he got what he deserved, right? So they walked out, right? And so Gus went he went up to the school board and he said, I want Bradbury fired. And so what they decided to do, they had to work out a compromise. Could he apologize? And they accepted that. But you get scarred by things like that. And so he and Mommy, in talking things over, just decided they had given a child to integration. Sent me to grandmother thinking I would be safe. Never realizing that, one, there is no safety. I mean, if there's one thing my grandmother did for me, I know that there's no safety. I mean, even now, I fly in planes and you have to take off your shoes and open your mouth and do all them crazy things they ask you to do. See, do you have a bomb? But I think the United States has a hell of a nerve to want to be safe when we're bombing people. By what right? By what right are you safe?
Amen. Amen. Your grandmother was such an important part of your life, and when she made her transition, you wrote a beautiful poem called Lady of Pleasure about your love for her and about your loss, and we're going to ask our young sisters over here if they'll say that poem for us.
Master, the tempest is raging, and are tossing high. The sky is all shadowed with blackness. No shelter or help is nigh.
Some small island birthed her, and a big, probably white ship took her from mother to come to America's recreation. She lives in the top of my building. I only know her through her eyes. She's old now, not only from years, but from aging. One gets the impression she was most beautiful, or like good wine or a semi-precious jewel touted out for the pleasure of those who could afford her recreation. Her head is always high, and though the set of her mouth shows it's not easy, she asks nothing, seems to have something to give, but no one to give it to, if ever she gave it to anyone. Age requires happy memories, like Lavinia smiled when she died, and though her doctor had told her not to, there was pork cooking on the stove. There are so many new mistakes for a lady of pleasure that can be made. It seems unnecessary to repeat the old ones. And it was cold that morning on the elevator when I spoke to her and foolishly asked, "How are you?" She smiled and tilted her head. "At least," I said, "the sun is shining." Her eyes smiled yes. And I was glad to be there to say through spirits, there is a new creation to her.
Master, the tempest was raging, and all the billows are tossing high. The sky is all shadowed with blackness. No shelter or hope is nigh.
Amen. Let's talk a little bit about Fisk. You enrolled at Fisk University twice. The first time you were expelled after a run-in with the conservative dean of women. Your grandmother was very much in your corner, but Fisk didn't really care about anybody being in your corner, and they asked you to leave. The second time, things had changed when you came back, and you were welcomed back. They expunged your record of being a troublemaker, and you started taking writing workshops with John O'Killens and reestablished a chapter of SNCC on the campus, so that your second experience at Fisk was very different. Can you talk a little bit about Fisk, about that first time there, and what really greeted you when you got there the first time?
Well, I was an early entrant, first of all, and I think it's a good program. I still think it's a good program. I also have to say, in all honesty and all fairness, and I have said it before, see, Fisk was right. I was wrong. And I was running roughshod over a lot of people. And the Dean of Women was wrong to kick me out, but I was wrong to push her. Mm-hmm. And so you had to learn something. You have to learn. And so I could sit here and say, I was right, but I wasn't. And she kicked me. I saw Dean Cheatham. As a matter of fact, I was in the Smithsonian recently. And a woman came up to me. She said, you don't know who I am, do you? And I try to usually be nice about it, but something said, no, I don't. And I did. And she said, I'm Ann Cheatham. And I said, hey, how you doing? Because she was right. And I wanted to say that. Ann, you were right. And was I upset about it? Yeah. But it was time for me to lose at something. Because if I never lost, then I would never have appreciation for what I won. And I got kicked out of school, but I did get to travel. Civil rights movement was going on. I got a lot of good things. But I also realized, I don't look like Halle Berry. You know what I'm saying? I'm not drop dead gorgeous. I'm not, Serena or Venus Williams. I can't play anything. If I'm going to live, it's going to come. All of my strengths are here up, right? It's all in my head. So that means I have to go back to school. Could I have enrolled at University of Cincinnati or something? Sure. But if I'm having a failure at Fisk, then I need to go back to Fisk. So I borrowed a friend's car and drove down and wanted to meet the Dean of Women because I figured if I couldn't get along with the Dean, I'm not going to make it the second time, so that's going to be a waste. And we talked, and she said, she pulled my record. She said, my God, girl, what did you do? Because the record is like that, right? I'd only been in school for, I said, I wasn't really good at taking a lot of stuff. I think I had a lot of anger. And if you think I'm bad now, there's a lot of things happening that make you unhappy. And I had to work through a lot of things. And I'm very patient, and a lot of people weren't. And Dean Cheatham and I had different visions of what a lady is and what a woman should do. And I say again, I was just lucky because I really love Jackie. I totally adored her because she said, okay, what do you need? And I said, actually, I think I need an apartment, which was a no-no. For any of you Fiskites in the room, you didn't do that. And I'm grown. I need an apartment. She said, well, you can have an apartment if you don't tell anybody that you do. I said, oh, I keep secrets. I can handle that, and I did, because I'm too old to live with the dorm girls and that foolishness. So I didn't say that I did, and nobody else said that I did, and that worked. And what I wanted to do was actually, make Dean's List and live happily ever after, and we did that. I think Fisk was an excellent experience. There's sons and daughters ever on the altar. And Fisk University is an important institution. And
Tell me a little bit about your college life growing, if not you, maybe your kids or something like that going to college.
it must be, yeah, it is. It is.
Did you know that you were a writer at that time when you were at Fisk?
Pearl, as long as you know, I still don't. I'm sitting down, I'm working on a new book. It's called Acolytes. And every day that I sit to work, I think, am I going to get through? I haven't taken anything, and I don't know why that one. That's not one that I can answer. But I don't take anything for granted. And I think I go at full tilt because I never know what's going to happen next. Tomorrow is not given.
How important was John O'Killen's workshop to you at that moment?
John Killens had the first Black Arts Festival at Fisk, and we had Leroy Jones. He was Leroy Jones and Bob Hayden. It was wonderful. Negro Digest sent David Lawrence down, and David was a good friend. David was a wonderful man, right? And David asked everybody to write something, right? And so all of John's workshop got to write something, and we all sent it in. But mine got lost. So the Negro Digest came out, and they couldn't find it. And, you try not to be upset because I figured nobody deliberately, right? David finally realized I wasn't there, and so he called Jubilee Hall. He called and said, we lost your piece. And I said, yes, you did. He said, well, you didn't call and complain. I said, well, David, I figured, it wasn't personal. You lost it. He said, well, if you'll write something else, I'll see to it that it gets in. So I said, thank you. It turns out to be great because instead of being one of 10 people, I now have my own byline. That was my first experience in publishing, and it was just very lucky that something like that happened. It was very lucky that I didn't complain, because if I had said to David, what are you doing? I'm just going to make him angry, and he didn't mean it.
Did you find that interaction with all those writers that came for that festival, did that help you at all? Did that push you in any direction or another to have Leroy Jones and all of the folks who came there to be at the festival interacting with you?
You know, we just screamed when Roy walked into the room, you know, I mean, because, you know, that's when he's up against the wall, you know. Melvin B. Tolston was there. And Melvin Tolston is probably the most underrated great writer in America. And Tolston has that wonderful line, when the skins are dried, the flies will go home. And it always stayed with me. It's libretto for Liberia. And it always stayed with me. So I learned a lot. Of course, Gwen Brooks came down. I knew Gwen, you know, and we met Dudley Randall. And Dudley solicited, though I did not participate in that, solicited for Malcolm X. And I did not know Malcolm. I didn't have the opportunity. I did know Betty, and Betty is, of course, my sorority sister. But I never had an opportunity, so I didn't want to write at that point about Malcolm because everybody had remembrances, and I didn't know him. So I did not, but I did get to meet Dudley. So it was wonderful. I mean, those were good years.
And then you worked with Dudley Randall at Broadside Press. They actually distributed your second book.
They did.
Was that helpful to have a publisher after doing everything independently? Because I do have such a great memory of you and some of the other writers who came around that time to Detroit with your books in the trunks of these little cars. It seemed like everybody had a little broken up Volkswagen. But having a publisher who actually would help in distribution, did that make a difference in terms of getting your work in the hands of people?
Yeah, it did. I'm so very proud of the self-publishing industry, because I think that I had a lot to do with helping people see that you don't have to wait on other people to come to you. You can do it. And of course, you know, you have to give so much credit to a young woman named Zane, because Zane is a brilliant young writer. Elin Harris is a brilliant young writer. He did the same thing. What we were doing is publishing ourselves. What we needed, or what I thought, because on that level you have to put your business hat on. We needed a central distribution place, right? So if I would publish the book, I could control the paper, the quality of the ink, the color. I could control everything. I could get it to Dudley, right? And then Dudley could distribute it. Now, this means one thing, and boys and girls, what does this mean? Nikki doesn't make any money, right? Because there's no way
Tell me in the comments your favorite self-published book.
to make any money if you do that, because if you're going to make money, then your book is selling for more than anybody else's book is selling for, and that's not going to work, right? So I decided to go for the length. Right? I just said, okay, I'm gonna get the book out there, and I'll worry about the money at some other time.
And how much were they selling for? Because that's what I was going to say. I have it cost, because the little dollar is up in the corner.
But
that all of those books cost $1. Yeah,
$1 was a lot of money. But I was at Columbia, and I had been in social work school, which was like not going to happen, and it wasn't. I was very fortunate in my later deans, because Dean Louise Shoemaker took me out to lunch one day. She said, Nikki, you know, we need to go to lunch. And it's like, okay. And I'm happy because I'm doing good papers. And she said, you know, we love reading your report. We love everything. She said, but you know, you're not going to be a social worker. And I said, I did. I was about to get fired. I said, I fear you may be right. She said, you know, you don't report. I had a group, for those of you, I had a group, and one of my girls got pregnant. My supervisor says to me, you didn't write up what's her name was pregnant. And I said, but she's not pregnant. She said, well, she was. I said, but she's not. And if I write it up, when she runs for governor of Delaware, somebody will dig it up, right? And he said, well, your loyalty is to the agency. I said, no, my loyalty is to a girl who had a eraser on her pencil. And so I knew I was going to get fired. Louise knew I was going to get fired. And you also all have to know I didn't have any money, right? And so Louise said to me, she said, I did something I probably shouldn't have done. And she said, I sent your writings up to Columbia. She said, I have a friend at Columbia. And I sent them up to Columbia for the MFA program. I said, oh, Louise, thank you, but I can't afford the MFA program. She said, well, I thought that. And so I took the liberty of applying for a scholarship for you.
I'm very glad they told you not to be a social worker, because we all, I think, are grateful that you're writing.
Oh, it's fun. It's good.
This time that we're talking about was definitely a time of political upheaval and introspection for us as Black people, and unrest. And some, I think, would say that this was actually a time of Black judgment. And we're going to let the girls kind of give us another poem.
Childhood remembrances are always a drag if you're Black. You always remember things like living in Woodlawn with no inside toilet. And if you become famous or something, They never talk about how happy you were to have your mother all to yourself, or how good the water felt when you got your bath from one of those big tubs that folk in Chicago barbecue in. And somehow, when you talk about home, it never gets across how much you understood their feelings as the whole family attended meetings about Hollydale. And even though you remember, your biographers never understand your father's pain as he sells his stock and another dream goes. And though you're poor, it isn't poverty that concerns you. And though they fought a lot, it isn't your father's drinking that makes any difference, but that everybody is together, and you and your sister have happy birthdays and very good Christmases. I really hope no white person ever has cause to write about me, because they will never understand. Black love is black wealth. And they'll probably talk about my hard childhood and never understand that all the while I was quite happy.
We went there to confer on the possibility of blackness and the inevitability of revolution. We talked about black leaders and black love. We talked about women and black men. No doubt, many important resolutions were passed as we climbed Malcolm's ladder. But the most valid of them all was that rap chose me.
Did you ever see a conflict or feel a conflict in your own life between being a writer, being an artist, and being the radical revolutionary force that you were? Did they work together, or did you see them as in conflict ever in your work?
I just always thought that this was my contribution. And a lot of things. I mean, to see rap really bothers me. It touches me probably more than anything, because he should not be in jail. He should be teaching classes someplace too. No, he's a great man, and history will bear that out, and that's a great loss, that he's sitting there rotting like that. But
talk a little bit about him at that conference. So many young people really don't know much about Rap Brown. They didn't see him.
Rap Brown is the reason that we talk about rapping, because he rapped. And he would do that thing with his, this young brother, he would do that because he's from Alabama, got that brogue. And of course, he's very charismatic, and rap didn't back off of anything. Rap did not know compromise. And you really did wish that somehow in talking to them, you wish that you could have tempered it somehow. It just never did. I mean, they shot Rap. I mean, you remember that. And they were going to kill him, going to do what they did. They were going to lie and put him in jail. And it's a loss, because Rap is one of the best thinkers of his generation, and that's reality. So you're very sorry that I'm sorry about prison, period. It's a bad idea getting worse. It was a bad idea when it was a new idea. It's a worse idea now that it's an old one. And I hate that we are privatizing prisons, therefore guaranteeing that we're going to put people in prison. And we're doing a really vicious thing with the middle class, which, again, my generation, since we all went to jail, everybody went to jail. But now the middle class is like, I didn't go to jail, and so they don't want to be bothered with the brothers and the sisters who are in jail. And that's a shame, because the people are in jail because, you happen to be there. And that's not to say that you want to just pick up your, next door neighbor, who is a murderer or a rapist or something. I'm not trying to say that. But I am saying those people need to vote. Prisoners need vote. They need all of the rights and responsibilities of citizenship so that they can rejoin us. Yes. It's so important that we rethink. It's so important that the black middle class quit being afraid of being black.
Amen. You have such a clear idea about your work as part of the struggle that we're involved in as black people. Do you feel that same kind of commitment, that same kind of energy from contemporary black writers, from young writers today, that same connection to a movement, that same connection to a force for change that you felt when you were writing Black Feeling, Black Talk?
I like what the kids are doing because they're business people. And if there's one thing that the black community has proven, I mean, that's Detroit, you know, that's Tulsa, Oklahoma. We have proven that we are good business people. Our generation was not good business people. That's not what we did. We were good civil rights people. But now the kids that are coming are good business people again. You look at Russ Simmons, you look at Puffy, they are not just doing their entertainment thing, they are also doing restaurants. Puffy's got a restaurant here. They're also doing clothes. They're also expanding and being able to hire people. They're being able, you know, you look at Queen Latifah, she started off, she's reading a little poetry. She goes to Hollywood. She's helped to change Hollywood. And so it's been wonderful to see what the kids have done because they've changed it. Because if the rappers can put 5,000 seats, if they can put bodies in 5,000 seats, then Hollywood has to say, now what kind of movies do we make to make this work? And it works, it's important. Somebody will say, well, Nick, I don't like Fat Beach. You see what I'm saying? Because it's not made for you. It's made for young people. You all are too old. It ain't about you and me. You know, I was so hurt because the brilliant group who's right here, Outkast, and I so admire Outkast. I was so hurt that Rosa Parks' people got involved in this thing with Outkast because it was so ugly, because we know, come on now, we know that Mrs. Parks does not wake up and tune into WAOK right?
And listen to
and listen to what's being, no, somebody had to bring this to her, and somebody brought it to her the wrong way because Outkast was giving her a shout out. They were saying, you know, we want the younger people to know who you are. It's very important. It's true.
How do you bridge that gap between those of us who are older and the young people who are making that music? Because I know for many of us, once your kids are old enough to get out of the house, you turn that radio back to another station and you don't hear their music as often as you used to. How do you bridge that gap between us and them?
Well, I just basically, because I teach and I'm lucky that I try to pay attention. But if you ask me, I mean, what's in my CD? You see that?
It's gonna
now,
be
I'm gonna show my
Womack.
age. What's in my iPod? What's in my CD right now, right? Gene Ammons, right? I mean, I'm listening to old John Coltrane, Mingus. I can probably get the other two because I have a six changer. I'm listening. I'm listening to jazz, right? Because that's what I listen to. But I'm also knowing not to judge what I'm hearing about what the kids are hearing. Because my mother did not like Ray Charles. My mother thought, why, as she said to me, does that Negro always stutter and shout? You know, because I'm a fool, you know. She was, why is that, that's what she said, why does that Negro always stutter and shout? But my grandmother didn't like Billy Eckstine, because Billy Eckstine used to sing a song, say, jelly, 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 jelly stays on my mind. And
Tell me your thoughts about Billy Eckstine and Ray Charles in the comments.
my grandmother knew that to be a dirty song. It took me the longest while I realized he wasn't talking about bread and butter. But that's the truth. Every generation dislikes the music of the next generation. That's the truth. And so you let that roll. You know, you have to ask the kids. You have to see how they are responding to the music. What is it doing for them?
You recorded an album, reading your poetry with the New York Community Choir years ago, Truth is on Its Way. Yeah. Did reading the poetry with a choir, with live music, change your experience of the words because the music was so much a part of what you were doing? Well,
Again, I grew up in the Baptist church, and the one thing that I loved always was the choir, was the gospel choir. I like the anthems, but I love the gospel choir. And I would never, ever, ever miss church on the Sundays that I knew the gospel choir was singing. So I grew up, no, I mean, you know, your grandmother wouldn't let you miss anyway, but I paid attention. And I always liked what they were doing. So I wrote, and I always knew that I still do. I write to music, but I did the gospel because Ellis Hazlett did soul. And Ellis, I did a lot of favors for Ellis because I was like a gopher on soul. And again, I learned that for everybody's young, forget getting paid. If you can get the position, everything else is going to work. And so I was working on soul. I did a lot of things for him. And he finally said, what would you like to do? And I said, well, what I'd like to do is something with gospel music. Now, grandmother was dead, of course. But what I wanted to do was something in her memory. And so that would be gospel music. So she was singing Peace Be Still, right? And that was a song that always fascinated me because, again, it was the longest before I realized it was peace, comma, be still. Because I always thought it was peace, be still, as opposed to war, be troublesome, right? And, you know, Jesus is out on the lake, right? And he says, you know, peace, be still. But I was looking at it in the larger context. So I wrote the great Pox Whitey, Two Piece Be Still. It was James Cleveland. I met James. James was a good cook. And he was a wonderful man. And James came to New York shortly after I had made the recording. James came to New York, and he was at Madison Square Garden. He sold out, of course, he's Cleveland, you know. And he said, and now we're going to do that song that everybody's singing, right? And I'm backstage, so when he comes off, I said, James, everybody's not singing that song, only you and I. He said, I know, baby, I know.
But they will.
He was a great man, the Prince of Gospel. He was a great God, he could sing.
Let's talk a little bit about gender. Does gender have as large a part in your work as race does?
Jenny Fowler, who is a critic and a good friend, says that everything that I write about is about the world as a black woman, that there is no gender, that is all, I look at the world as a black woman, so I'm always writing through that. On the other hand, I realize a lot of images, if you just read my work individually, you would see a lot of male images because the male images are universal. So I even will talk about, for example, King, and you'll see King all the way, you know, through. Or you'll see Emmett. I write a lot about Emmett, right? And it's not that there aren't other people. It's that you're using the images that everybody can use, but I'm always looking through the eyes. So I always think of everything as coming through the eyes of a black woman. Because to me, if you say, who am I am a Southern black woman, very much grounded in the women of my grandmother's generation.
What do you think that we have put forward, our generation, to replace those things that we watched our mothers do and our grandmothers do? Is there anything that we've created that steps into that void?
I don't see it. I see us struggling in our 60s to try to figure out now, having done a good job at what we set out to do, what do we now do? Our socialization has been very different because so much of our youth was spent in public. I don't know if people actually appreciate how much we all grew up, whether known or not, in public. All of our mistakes were public mistakes. And it's one of the reasons that I have such a sympathy for some of the young women that we're seeing now, because they too are growing up, and you can't condemn people for doing the same things that everybody else did. And we had to grow up in public. You know, I look at my friend Julian Bond. Julian grew up in public and remained sane. And we all have problems, right? But he's a committed man. And I'm so happy that he took over the NAACP, that he remained doing that. Somebody could say, well, Julian, you know, divorced his wife or whatever, but, you know, you get married, you have to get divorced. What the hell?
You've appealed to a whole new generation with your understanding and your support of hip-hop, and Tupac is certainly a part of that. And his death, Tupac Shakur's death, hit you hard, and you wrote about that. So I'm going to ask our young sisters if they will share that poem with us, and we'll talk a little bit about Tupac.
As I tossed and turned, unable to achieve sleep, unable to control the anxiety, unable to comprehend why Tupac is not with us. If those who live by the sword die by the sword, there'd be no white men on earth. If those who lived on hatred died on hatred, there would be no KKK. And if those who lived by lies died by lies, there'd be nobody on Wall Street, in executive suites, in academic offices instructing the young. Don't tell me he got what he deserved. He deserved a chariot and the accolades of a grateful people. He deserved his life. It is as clear as a mountain stream, as deafening as a thunderstrike, as terrifying as Son of Vampires. Tupac told the truth. There are those who wanted to call it dirty gangster rap, inciting. There are those who never wanted to be angry at the conditions, but angry at the messenger who reported your kitchen has roaches, your toilet is overflowing, your basement has so much water the rats are in the living room, your house is in disorder, and Tupac told you about it.
What a beautiful boy. Graceful carriage, melodic voice, sharp wit, intellectual breath, What a beautiful boy to lose. Not me. Never me. I do not believe East Coast, West Coast. I saw the murder Malcolm X. I saw the murder Emmett Till. I saw the murder Martin Luther King. I witnessed them shooting Rat Brown. I saw them beat Leroy Jones. I saw them fill their jails. I see them burning churches. Not me. Never me. I don't believe this is some sort of mouth action. This is some sort of political action. And they picked well. They picked the brightest, freshest fruit from the tallest tree. What a beautiful boy. But he will not go away. As Malcolm did not go away, as Emmett Till did not go away. Your shooting him will not take him from us. His spirit will fill our hearts. His courage will strengthen us for the challenge. His truth will straighten our backbones. You know, Socrates had a mother. She too watched her son drink hemlock. She too asked, why? Tupac has a mother. The lovely Afeni had to bury her son. It is not right. It is not right. This young warrior is being cut down. It is not right for the old to bury the young. It is not right.
This generation mourns Tupac, as my generation mourned Till, as we all mourned Malcolm, this wonderful young warrior. Sonia Sanchez said when she learned of his passing, she walked all day, walking the beautiful warrior home to our ancestors. I just cried, as all mothers cry, for the beautiful boy who said he and Mike Tyson would never be allowed to be free at the same time, who told the truth about them and who told the truth about us, who is our beautiful warrior. There are those who wanted to make him the problem, who believed that by silencing Tupac, all would be quiet on the ghetto front. There are those who testified that the problem wasn't the conditions, but the people talking about them. They took away band, so the boys started scratching. They took away gym, so the boys started breakdancing. The boys started rapping because they gave them the guns and the drugs, but not the schools and the libraries. What a beautiful boy to lose. And we mourn Tupac Shakur, and we reach out to his mother, and we hug ourselves in sadness and in shame. And we are compelled to ask, are you happy, Miss Tucker? Tupac is gone. Are you happy?
Can you articulate for me why you think Tupac struck such a chord in you? You actually have Thug Life tattooed on your arm after he died.
I did,
What is it that, that touched you so deeply about him?
First of all, you know, I spent a time in prison, in correctional institution with young people, in women's prison. I do a lot of volunteering. Everybody likes Tupac. If I could go to high school and I'll mention Tupac, everybody likes Tupac. I go to college, you know, and there's no way to avoid the breadth of this young man. And it's the love. When you start to talk to people, you know, it's the love that they felt about him, that they felt that he was given to them. Everybody feels warm about Tupac, that listened to his work, that heard him. And it's very unusual. You know, I'm not against any other rapper or anything like that. It's just very unusual that you can go into almost any venue and people will say, yeah, I know his work. I liked it. And I thought, wow, I got the tattoo because I thought my generation should mourn with the younger generation. And I thought that we should do something to let them know we do understand that this is a loss. Tupac is a loss.
How do you respond to people who recognize his genius as an artist, as a very charismatic performer, but have serious problems with some of the attitudes toward women that come through in some of the music that he did?
But see, I'm an old blues person, so I'm understanding what you're saying. But 90% of the blues songs, my man, he don't love me, or she done something to me, right? It's the metaphor. Women are the metaphor of America. I'm not backing off of anything like that. And so you end up with the rappers are doing the same thing. Do I wish they would read a little bit more and bring some other images in? You bet. But women are always going to be. But if you talk again to the women, you talk to the girls, they are not feeling excluded by what he's saying, that they are not feeling an attack by what he's saying. And so again, I have to step back as an older person to say, okay, I'm not really comfortable with some of the things that MWA said, for example. You know, it's like, I don't think I really want to bop down the highway listening to that. But that doesn't mean that the entire genre or the entire body of work is without merit. I can't believe that.
Do you think that there's a space for those of us who may have problems with some of that, not just in his work, but in the hip-hop world? Is there a way that we can communicate more directly with some of the artists, or should we just, as the older generation, just kind of say, go on, children, make your music?
No, I think you should probably go out to a couple of the clubs and watch and see what's happening. I think that when we have the opportunity to talk to people, Essence Magazine gave me the wonderful opportunity because they do these conversations, speaking of Queen Latifah. And they asked Queen Latifah who would she like to talk to, and she said me. And I just couldn't have been more delighted, but she's working on a movie, right? I'm an old woman, you know, I'm busy. And so, no, I mean, you try to, you know. Sure. So I got on the plane, and I said, because she didn't have time to come to Virginia, I said, I'd be happy to fly to California. So she was saying, oh, you know, it's so nice of you. I said, no, it wasn't so nice of me. I am supposed to be there for you. And I have the time where you don't. There was a time that I wouldn't have had the time. But that's what we do. We allow them to reach back. You know, I've been trying to connect with Jill Scott because she's a great kid.
Love her.
And it's just that there are things that are going on. And we who are older, of course we should be involved. You know, would I have a good time every night going to a club and listen to a rapper? No. I'm way too old. But I have been in some of both the comedy clubs, which comedy can be very vicious and nobody complains about that, and in the hip hop, you know, and watch the slams and things like that. You get a lot of different things, but you also, by being a part of it, can recognize where you want to take and what you want to say about it. Because what the kids are trying to do is live. And they're trying to live, and they're trying to say what they think. Now, sometimes I don't believe that many drug dealers who actually were this good at rapping. I think that I don't. I think the drug dealers deal drugs and the rappers rap. And so they need to, you know, some of the lies need to stop. Everybody didn't have a hard childhood, and if they did, suck it up and go on.
Amen. Amen.
That's true. But
you were saying that what they're trying to do is live, and this is definitely a time in our country when lives are at stake and lives are being lost every day, and our country is bombing people and at war all over the world. What do you see as the writer's role in wartime when our country is doing all of the things that our country is doing, and we are citizens of the country? Do you think that writers have a special role in a critical time like this?
Whatever I'm a citizen of, it's Earth, because otherwise you get stuck in this 15th century concept of who you should be because you happen to be born someplace, all of a sudden you owe an allegiance. I don't think so. The only people who have been in a space with no known landmarks and no expectation of positive welcome has been the Africans who were on their way to being enslaved in America. These people were a courageous and a brave people. They had to come through stormy waters with some really mean people that they recognized that. They had to stand on an auction block and be oiled up and sold and branded and marched to a plantation and they expected themselves to remain sane. They had to reimagine themselves. If Earth intends to fulfill its prophecy of the 21st century, we're going to have to learn from those people because space is middle passage. We're going to have to learn from those people. How do you maintain yourself when everything that you knew is gone? The key to sane life on Earth resides in those Africans who made middle passage. These were great people, and we have just begun to tap into what they're bringing to us.
I want to read you a quote from James Baldwin that sounds a lot like what I think about your work. And Baldwin wrote, "You write in order to change the world, knowing perfectly well that you probably can't, but also knowing that literature is indispensable to the world. The world changes according to the way people see it, and if you alter, even by a millimeter, the way people look at reality, then you can change it." Before we close for the evening, would you say one of your poems for us?
Oh, I'd be delighted.
Thank you.
I only want to be there to kiss you, as you want to be kissed when you need to be kissed, where I want to kiss you because it's my house, and I plan to live in it. I really need to hug you when I want to hug you, as you like to hug me. Does this sound like a silly poem? I mean, it's my house, and I want to fry pork chops and bake sweet potatoes and call them yams, because I run the kitchen, and I can stand the heat. I spent all winter in carpet stores gathering patches so I could make a quilt. Does this really sound like a silly poem? I mean, I want to keep you warm. And my windows might be dirty, but it's my house. And if I can't see out sometimes, they can't see in either. English isn't a good language to express emotion through. Mostly, I imagine, because people try to speak English instead of trying to speak through it. I don't know. Maybe this is a silly poem. I'm saying it's my house, and I'll make fudge and call it love, and touch my lips to the chocolate warmth, and smile at old men and call that revolution, because what's real is really real. And I still like men in tight pants, because everybody has something to give, and more important, needs something to take. And this is my house, and you make me happy. So this is your place.
Tell me your thoughts about this video in the comments. Nikki Giovanni has spoke on poetry. You've seen her recite poetry as well, rappers and family. So tell me which parts of this video do you consider to be your favorite and least favorite? Let's have a discussion. But as always, don't forget to like, share, watch more videos, and subscribe to the channel.